In marketing, it's really easy to move from one campaign to the next, and we have this short-term mindset. But what if you were in charge of a campaign that went for year after year after year? How would you keep it interesting, and how would you build on your success without burning out? Welcome to the CMO Show. Great to see you. Mark Jones is my name. Wonderful to have you with us. The CMO Show is, of course, produced by Impact Institute in partnership with Adobe. Now, I'm really stoked about this interview. We have with us Nathan Lowe. He's the Chief Marketing Communications Officer at Meat Livestock Australia, MLA. Of course, he is the custodian of the famous lamb ad. It barely needs any explanation, but the lamb ad, of course, rolls around every January, and it reminds us that we need to go and buy lamb, but it also is a touchstone for Australian culture and a really wonderful multicultural approach they take to it as well. So what does it take? And really, in a nutshell, this interview is all about a deep dive into the creative process. What does it take to do it each year? How do they think? How do they feel? What data do they use as a whole team? How do they work with their agencies? And what are the approaches they take to really challenging old ideas, to being brave, to use a bit of marketing speak, and to thinking about how they can adequately reflect Australian culture in a way that keeps us talking for days and days. Fascinating interview. Let's get into it. Nathan Lowe, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
So tell me about the origin story. Where did it come from?
Yeah, so what's cool is what most people probably don't realise is when we talk about the lamb ad being 20, 21 years old, and in its current form as a TV ad or a film it actually started 5 years earlier as a call to arms radio campaign. And ironically, given the world we're living in today, it actually started because the US government, with Bill Clinton as president at the time, slapped 40% tariffs on Australian lamb being exported to the US. So in response to exporting less to the US and needing to consume more domestically, it started as a tactical campaign to rally Australians to support Australian farmers. And so the whole origins of eating lamb being an Australian thing to do. Summer actually didn't have a lot of campaigns at that time. So January and the lead up to Australia Day was chosen deliberately because there weren't many other brands. Everyone was focused in the lead up to Christmas, and January was a bit of a wasteland for brands. So there was a gap there.
Let you stand out.
It was 2000, by the way, as well. So there was national pride was booming because it was an Olympic year. All the investment that was going into Sydney at the time. So it was really cool. So actually started as a radio ad, and it was a radio ad for 5 years before it became a TV ad. And it only became a TV ad because they wrote a radio script that was so good that Warren Brown, the ECD at BMF at the time, went to David Thomason, who was the marketing director at MLA, and went, "This is so good, find 40 grand and we'll make a TV ad." Now, of course, he had to find more than 40 grand. That was just to make it. He then had to find media money to put it on TV.
Yep.
But unless those two people had the vision that this writing is so good, we need to get it beyond radio, we wouldn't have the lamb campaign the way we have it today.
Now, let's just hypothetically imagine nobody understands the lamb ad, or maybe there's one person listening to us that is not quite sure. How would you describe the lamb ad?
It's a great question. Well, certainly what we've done for the last few years is it's kind of like a state of the nation. It's an ad to drive demand for Australian lamb, but tries to find something really topical, something really culturally relevant that is a reflection of what's going on in Australia at that point in time.
And it's interesting you say that because we've had MLA talking about the lamb ad back in 2017, so it's quite fun to revisit it now through that cultural lens. And I love the idea that advertising can become cultural reflections and commentary to an extent. But the thing that strikes me about it is it's always been funny. Now, how hard is that?
Well, look, when you work with great creatives and really talented writers, it's hard for me to be funny. It doesn't seem to be hard for them to be funny.
Yeah.
I think where the real trick is it's hard to be funny and on brand
Yes.
and authentic
Yes.
and culturally topical.
This is where in creative we talk about being brave, right? And I think the bravery actually comes about, I guess, getting a new tweak on it every year. So maybe just give us from your perspective, how do you steward something like that? There's sort of like an ongoing journey and an energy that you've got to maintain.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because we talk about a little bit about how you can the LAMAD has kind of proven that you can be consistent and stay with the pace of culture because it's kind of the model for that. The brief hasn't changed since I've been at MLA for 6 years. We've really held true to the core brief of what we're trying to achieve, what the lamb brand stands for, and what makes a great LAMAD. But I think where the trick is when we start the process, which every year is June, July. So we're trying to pick 6 months out what's going to feel really relevant and topical January the following year. And we don't dive into writing scripts. We start with broad cultural territories and we explore those quite a lot to find out what feels sticky, what's going to be creative, what you can write really interesting scenarios to, but also feel relevant for lamb to comment on, and that Australians will think it's okay for us to poke fun at it.
So maybe describe for us then how you go about doing that in partnership with your agency, because I think a lot of marketers wonder about that creative process behind the scenes. So if we pick on the latest one, right? So Happiness.
Yep.
Sam Kekovic with the, I've got to say, I love he had the barbecue on his desk.
Yep.
Right. How did that come about? So what was the creative process like with that big sort of cultural sketch that you're speaking about?
Yeah, I mean, that's where the strategic planners with your agency partners really add a lot of value, as well as like the experienced senior creatives that have worked across multiple campaigns, because they tend to have, there's a bit of corporate memory there and a feel for what is and isn't going to work. Historically, and certainly for a long time, because the campaign's really always been anchored on the idea of unity, we've started with looking for things that are dividing Australians, and that's how you end up with campaigns that talk about border walls, or campaigns that talk about the generation gap, or even the campaign that felt like a very full circle moment for Australian lamb, where we took on calling everything un-Australian. So we always start there. This year was very different. For me, this year's campaign struck a different tone to the other 5 that I've made. And it's because we couldn't find anything in those initial phases that felt big enough, that was from a division perspective to bring people together. And where we got to this idea is it started from a point of view of thinking, just feels like Australia needs a pep talk. It felt like we needed to be a bit more, rather than going for division and bringing people together, to actually have a more positive slant. And just remind Australians about all the things that we love about Australia and that make us happy. But as we started exploring that territory of Australia feels like it's lost its mojo a little bit, maybe lamb needs to come along and give it a pep talk, and then the creatives and the strategic planners start diving into what's going on in culture. And the key thing certainly for me, in terms of leading the project from the MLA side as the client, is yes, empower the agency to go for broke. But for me, it's just about focusing the team on the right idea that feels big enough that I feel will serve the needs of the lamb brand and will be consistent with the positioning that we have.
So just to quickly recap and reflect, you've actually got a narrative arc that you try to repeat, which you said was about how we look for division, lamb brings people together. So that's actually the recurring narrative that you look to build on. But what's interesting to me is thinking about how long that process must have taken. Like there's got to be months baked into this, right?
You'd be surprised because it's quite an intense process,
right?
And it kind of has to be because we can't start too early. If we start too early, the risk is you pick a topic that becomes irrelevant.
But didn't you say there was 6 months or was that just the whole elapsed time frame?
That's from when we brief the agency to when the ad goes on air.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so we'll start June, July.
Yeah.
We'll explore territories for probably 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, okay.
And the second phase of that is then trying to develop campaign ideas off those territories. The first campaign idea for this year's ad was actually about trying to make Australia more Scandinavian, because all of the top 3 countries were Scandinavians.
Of course, it's the Nordics.
So I was like, what have they got going on
that
we could learn from? And they were really hilarious, funny scripts.
Yeah.
But they weren't quite resonating because we're like, well, actually, it doesn't feel very culturally right for a nation that's competitive, that loves to punch above its weight on the world stage, to say we should be more like someone else.
Just like the Winter Olympics at the moment.
Yeah. So you have that phase where you're playing with the space and the idea and writing scenarios to see what feels right, what sticks. And then, by about mid-August, we're probably down to 2 scripts on one idea. We might have explored a couple of big ideas to see which ones would resonate the most with us. And then by mid-August, towards the end of August, you've probably got a couple of scripts off the idea that we're locked in on. And by September, we're all in on a script by then.
Okay.
Because we need to be in pre-production by October. So September, we're crafting. We're going into qual. We only do 1 round of qual. Mm-hmm. And by the time we get to research, we are already pot committed. We've gone all in. It's really just a gross negatives test to make sure.
Describe that.
Well, as in it's qual research groups, but essentially all we're testing for in that is there anything that's really not working?
Okay.
Are there scenes in here? And the best example I have for that is the Un-Australia campaign we did 2 or 3 years ago, opened in a schoolyard where school kids were being called un-Australian and disappearing. And it bombed so horrifically badly in research because it was not acceptable to people to make kids disappear.
Yes, of course.
And we're like, it's ruined the entire rest of the idea because people couldn't get over the fact that we were disappearing kids. Yeah. And as soon as we rewrote the opening scene, it just resonated so much more stronger because we knew the core idea of labelling everything un-Australian was relevant and topical because we'd got to the point where we couldn't define what Australian was anymore. So we knew the idea was strong, but there's things in the script that look really funny on paper that make us laugh that sometimes we learn from that research don't resonate.
That sounds like a good reminder about this concept that you can get too close to your own work. Like you just can't see things like that after a while.
Yeah, absolutely. And it works the other way as well. We've had the first lamb ad I made about the border walls that had a reprise scene at the end of ScoMo coming back after the walls had been torn down off the plane from Hawaii. That was referencing an incident that had happened more than 12 months earlier. And I was like, there's no way people are going to remember that. There's no way they'll find it funny. Yeah, and the agency was just like, trust us. It's going to work. And I'm like, I just don't think it will. I think we need something else. But we put it into research. And the first group, as soon as it got to that, everyone burst out laughing. And I'm like, all right, trust the people you work with because they know what they're doing.
That sounds like a live mic night, the comedy. So tell me then, from your point of view, what's the role of gut feel?
We've tried to translate a little bit of that gut feel into science. So when I joined MLA 6 years ago, the team and the agency had quite honestly recognised that the last 3 lamb ads hadn't been particularly good. There was actually a question out there: has the lamb ad lost its mojo? Is it still fit for purpose? Should we be doing something else? And one of the first things we did was actually try and define, a little bit, what are the secret herbs and spices? Mm-hmm. So we looked at the previous 15 lamb ads and went, okay, what's in all the ones that were amazing that work really well? Yeah. And what's different about, there were 5.
Okay.
So a third of them were defined by the team themselves as not as good.
So what was the golden thread?
Well, I don't want to give all the secrets away, but there's a few things that we now stick to. They're in the brief. They've been in the brief for the last 6 lamb ads. And if you sit and watch all the lamb ads, you can see these elements in them that are trying to turn that instinct into things that, if we know are there, are going to make something that resonates. So the idea has to feel big to start with. We can't be picking on a niche topic. Mm-hmm. It has to feel uniquely Australian. It can absolutely be global in nature. The generation gap idea or campaign blew up globally and did astronomical sort of view numbers because of that, because that was a very global idea, but it felt very relevant to Australia at that point in time because you had Gen Zs blaming boomers for why they can't afford to buy a house. So there was a uniquely Australian truth in that idea. It has to be uplifting and inspiring. If we're not telling a positive story, why tell it? Because that's not going to benefit the lamb brand. And we have to have permission to talk about it as lamb. And a good example of that, not where we've got it wrong, but where we're often nervous, have we got it right, is actually the first campaign I did, which was the border walls around COVID.
Yeah.
Because that's a very serious topic.
Of course.
People were dying.
Yep.
People couldn't cross borders to go to family funerals or major events. Parents were separated from children, etc., and vice versa. And we're like, can we really make fun of this?
Yeah.
But it's one of those things. You go, well, if we tell the story in a way that's authentic, that's another component of it. It has to be really authentic. And we get the balance right, and we're making fun of actual Australians' lived reality and kind of holding a mirror up to it so that they're in on the joke. So we're not preaching. We're not telling people how they should feel about the scenarios we're showing them. We're actually just reflecting their lives and what's going on and letting people come in on the joke. And I think that's one of the secret sources to why it's been so successful for so long.
Pun intended.
Is we're not shouting at people.
Yes. So what I love about the way you've described that is you're again building on the cultural identity that we've set up around lamb. And this kind of reminds me about this idea in marketing that positioning is everything. And it's about how you choose to position a product. There's only very few moments in the ad, if I think about the most recent one on happiness, where they're trying to convince these happiness inspectors that, Australia's happy, and they stick the lamb, in his face, right? And he takes a bite, and then his whole world, explodes. That's features and benefits marketing, but the tiniest bit in what's the punchline actually, but it's the tiniest bit in the overall campaign. How hard is it to hold to the big creative idea as a marketer when, of course, you've got all these commercial pressures, right? It's going to change year on year. There's going to be this sense of sales are down or whatever, and we've got to drive maybe a different message that comes from a product story. Does that make sense? You've got a fixed narrative that you're applying, and there's maybe is there a temptation to sort of move back towards
Look, I think there is for
side?
all marketers. I think all marketers in any industry, whether it's a emotional thematic campaign or a functional product-driven campaign, there's always a tension there.
Yeah.
For us, where the truth lies is the strategy for lamb.
Yeah.
Without being too transparent about it, is we've defined that driving cultural affinity for lamb is a key component of success for the brand, if we consider Australian lamb as the brand.
Yeah.
So because of that, the single biggest investment we make every year is in cultural affinity, and we measure that. So that's a KPI, and we measure it because we see that as the path to success. Yes, there are sensorial attributes of eating lamb, functional attributes that we try to reflect in the ad.
Yes.
The aroma and the sensorial attributes, the experience of eating lamb is amazing. But it's the emotional connection that campaign exists for. But the number one reason Australians eat lamb, if you ask them, it'll be, because I love lamb. Or why do you love lamb? They don't list off all the functional attributes.
No.
And the core idea, what's cool about the core premise of Unity is that there's a product truth to it as well. So one of the things the monkeys did when they came on board 10, 11 years ago is they partnered with MLA on a massive ethnographic study, which looked at the consumption of lamb, the occasions, the types of meals, and what differentiated lamb from other proteins. And why Unity as a cultural concept is also functionally correct for lamb, which gives the brand the permission to kind of own the space.
In other words, multicultural appeal.
Crosses most cultures, but also it's the types of, not just cuisines, it's the types of meals and the occasions you're eating it. So if you think about big share plates, whether it's a tagine or whether it's a roast, whether it's a lamb shoulder, or
You're making me
al
hungry.
fresco dining, and you've got the barbecue. The barbecue is naturally a social, people coming together environment. So lamb is served more on platters as a centre of table sheer dish than other proteins. So that idea of consuming it in a way with lots of other people in a style that is about sharing, there's a unique product truth there. So we don't feel the pressure to bundle in lots and lots of functional benefits because the concept and territory of Unity is true to the
Yeah.
brand functionally as well.
I think that's a really powerful lesson, is brand truth, because we are often tempted, or maybe there's some other data that tends to pull us away, like into an aspirational truth, but it's not actually grounded, so to speak. So then tell me about the success metrics that you touched on, and I'm interested to track that from campaign metrics through to sales. How do you think about this?
Look, we look at it a lot, and part of it's because of who MLA is and who we do this for. So, we're funded by farmer levies. So the government collects those levies from animal transactions and then gives those levies to us to invest on behalf of industry. And in the marketing space, our role is to drive demand for Australian lamb, both domestically and around the world.
Yep.
So ultimately, we need to sell more. Sales won't always, I'm kind of starting at the end and we'll work backwards. Sales is not always the right metric, because it might be a year of low supply because of weather conditions, and there hasn't been a lot of rain in the growing region, so there might be less lamb in the market. So volume is not necessarily our core driver, but maximising the value of the product that's available is. So that demand pressure, not just from consumers, but also from food service channels as well. So we also work really hard to get lamb on menu in that campaign window as well, to sort of, ride the wave of all the mental availability that we're generating.
Yeah, that's the behind the scenes channel stuff that people won't see.
Not many people see that. No. You sort of see it, like a couple of years ago, we partnered with Domino's where they launched a limited edition range of lamb pizzas, and they featured Sam Kekovich in their campaign delivering pizzas to people's doors and stuff like that. Yeah. So we look for opportunities like that kind of extends the campaign.
Yeah.
So we do look at sales, but it's a little bit more nuanced. We measure demand, and we kind of use consideration as a proxy for demand. We absolutely measure the effectiveness of everything we've done. So whether that's have we efficiently and effectively bought media, all of the tracking of the ad. So we work with Kantar on all the diagnostics around that. But the beauty of the lamb ad, and because it's so popular and it's become iconic, is we also get a lot of free additional research, because people will publish case studies on it to promote their organisations as thought leaders.
Of course.
Which allows us to do some really cool, fun things that wouldn't be the normal kind of metrics people would look at. But I like to do, because A, it's very engaging for the marketing team, and when the results are good, it's quite nice for the ego. So Cubery, big global advertising and concept research firm, they'll always publish their Cubery rankings ratings of the lamb ad. But because they also do exactly the same in the first week of February for all the Super Bowl ads, it allows me to benchmark the lamb ad against all the Super Bowl ads.
Now I have to ask, how's it doing?
So every year since we've been doing this, we come in the top 10.
Yeah, okay.
Which, if you think about the amount of money that get invested in those ads, and you're talking ads
it's an order of magnitude.
Crazy with, lots of celebrities and much bigger budgets than we have.
Yeah.
So it's a source of pride. Again, it's like Australia punching above its weight on a global scale. Yeah. This year, we actually would have been on the podium. We would have been second equal. So that definitely, the chest was pumped out and the head was expanding when I did that chart. And then naturally, I'm showing it to all our stakeholders, because it's bragging rights and stuff. But yeah, we look at all the same metrics that most marketers look at. And then we also have the luxury of being able to do some fun things as well.
So how is all of that informing then your marketing mix going forward? Because there's, you used to, in the day, get a lot of earned media as the primary, I guess, amplification channel. And there's an idea now that it's sort of not an ad, but more of like a mini moment, if you like. So give us a sense of how you're thinking about the strategies around the channels.
Yeah, so the way I think about it, and the way we've certainly, how it's evolved over the last few years, is to be really anchored on what's the core objective of this. So it's about affinity and driving that demand pressure from a metrics perspective. But in terms of the mechanism of the rollout of the campaign, we invest all this money in making an epic 3-minute film, or the aim is to make an epic 3-minute film. It doesn't have to be 3 minutes. Yeah. It could be 2:57, it can be 3:13, because it actually only lives on YouTube. Yeah. Which is great, because then you have when you get into the edit, you don't have to sacrifice a scene you really love to get from 3:05 to 3. So that's quite liberating for the creatives and the agency. But where we've evolved is to kind of go, well, if the best result for the brand is the most amount of people watching the 3-minute film or the long form ad, does it really matter if they see a 6-second cut down, a 10-second cut down, a 15-second cut down, a 30-second cut down? Because for a long time, it rolled out like a normal campaign.
Yes.
There was the big film that sat on digital and social, and then there was a whole typical campaign around it, which largely served...
So all the cuts and the...
All the cut downs. So that gave you reach and it gave you frequency. And that probably was a good thing for, driving people into the sales channel and reminding people that it's summer and it's lamb. But 3 years ago, we went, well, those are really just like movie trailers, or let's treat it like it's a new album that's dropping or it's a new movie that's coming out, and everything else, let's see what happens if we make everything else exist to serve the long form film.
In other words, use them as teasers.
Yeah, so what happened then is we went from the most viewed lamb ad ever prior to 2024 being 11 million views. Still a pretty good number. And we mostly only look at Australian views. Sometimes your numbers get boosted because expats share it or it gets into the marketing community and goes around the world. But this is a domestic marketing campaign for Australia. So we try to strip out international views. And treating those cut downs like movie trailers, because we saw the biggest benefit only coming from people who consumed the long form film. We went from the most viewed lamb ad ever being 11 million to 22 million. At which point I'm like, we will never beat this again. We've set a new benchmark that I don't know how I'm going to convince people that we can do better. And I don't know what to set our target at for the following year. Because how do you go from 11 to 22? Is 15 a good number?
Well, 22, just by the way, you're not far off the Australian population.
No, so in theory, everyone's seen it once. But the following year we did 21. So we almost got to 22.
Okay.
So we're like, okay, we've set a new benchmark here. What we did this year, which was definitely risky, and probably I was more nervous about this than any creative decision I've had to make. We didn't make a single cut down this year. We actually went, what if we put all the money into the long form film so that every media dollar we spent is in the channels where that is going to live to serve that in front of people?
You mean amplifying it when it's...
amplifying it on YouTube and through other sort of social digital channels. There's no cut downs. This year we made one film, a 3-minute film. Now it did run in cinema, so we did take some money to put it in cinema, and that's a little bit more around, well, it's epic and it's theatrical. That feels like a good environment in summer. We bought one spot on TV in the Ashes in the tea break because the Channel 7 commentary team could lead into it, and then we knew they'd talk about it afterwards. So that gave us a moment. That's also really important for me from managing stakeholders, because I can tell people where and when it's going to launch and they can go to see it. This year, we've done 34 million views.
Amazing.
So in 3 years, we've gone from 11 to 34, just not really through making a better ad, although the metrics would say we have made a better ad this year. But just through optimizing every part of the campaign. So that sort of looking at the marketing mix and trying to get better and better and learning from the past is a really important. I don't know what we're going to do next year.
I was going to say you're scaring yourself every year.
I have no idea what I'm going to do next year.
So what would you say to one of your peers who's in a similar situation where the mindset is, I actually haven't done it this way before? Like, and there's that like internal narrative of like, oh, this could go south.
So I think not every marketer has the luxury of sort of some of the empowerment we have. So there's a couple of things that sort of allow me a little bit more freedom than some of my peers would have. So I don't want to be preachy and go take risks and be bold and what have you, because not everyone can do that.
No, but we're all doing things we've not done before.
True. So I think there's two components for me that work. One is the risk appetite of the business. So marketing within MLA, from a board governance perspective, has a very, very high risk appetite. So that gives me that means my board is going to actually challenge me for not taking risks. Because so when we talk about brave creativity, the risk is actually not being bold and brave. Because then you're cookie cutter, you don't cut through, it's not going to resonate, it won't be memorable. So for us, part of the campaign, the core success factors, is to take risks.
Yes.
Now, usually that's a creative risk. This time it was very much a more commercial media risk.
Yeah, and an execution risk.
Yeah, but it was the narrative. So you've got to build a narrative around it. You've got to be able to sit in front of your exec team. You've got to be able to sit in front of your MD. You've got to be able to sit in front of the board, or in the case of me, I've also got to sit in front of a lot of lamb producer stakeholders.
Of course.
And be able to explain to them what I'm trying to achieve with the choice that I'm making. And for us, it was a very simple explanation, which was, you all love this thing. We're only spending directly, in direct media terms, a third of our budget on specifically driving this. The other 2/3 is based on an assumption that if someone watches this cut down, they will go and watch the long form because we've reminded them that it exists. And I'm not sure that holds true. And we kind of half proved it with the Un-Australia campaign, where we actually went, let's make our entire outdoor buy QR codes for the ad. Now, it wasn't just QR codes, because that would be really boring. It was statements that people had made about the ad. Not Un-Australia. Comment section. Because we were taking comments people had made on the ad and turning them. So it felt like it was part of the ecosystem of the campaign idea.
Yeah, it's fun.
The numbers on people using those QR codes to link through to watch the long form weren't great.
Okay.
We thought it was a super clever idea and really cool, and it probably worked as a piece of out-of-home.
Yeah.
But it didn't work in terms of directing people to watch the lamb ad. Now, they might have watched it later because it was now in their mind that the lamb ad was out. But we didn't have any hard data that says using all of this media on short form cut downs is going to result in someone watching the long form.
No, but you are in a culture from an organization perspective that rewards the pursuit of creativity. So you've got that, and that's a really amazing lesson. But you talk about the QR codes not working. What else have you got wrong? Because this is, objectively, this is a big thumbs up for all the work you're doing. But the journalist in me wants to know, what have you failed at?
So look, I don't want to come across like, everything we've done is amazing.
Well, no, I mean, it's obvious that it's hard work.
Where we've, I wouldn't say failed, it's more things that you haven't seen because they never saw the light of day.
Okay.
Because we couldn't get them across the line, or we couldn't make them happen. We wanted to rebrand. When we did Un-Australia, we wanted to do a cover wrap rebranding the Australian newspaper, the Un-Australian.
Yep.
And list all the things that people had called, it was just a big list of all the things people had called Un-Australian on Twitter. That to me is my biggest failure, because it was such a good creative and media concept, and we just couldn't get across the line. So that it's
what
not
was
really
the main
a failure.
reason? Just because it didn't think it'd work?
Well, you're asking a fairly large media property to play with their banner, and we probably didn't allow enough lead time to make that happen. We probably underestimated the amount of negotiations and layers that you have to go through, because not everyone shares our culture of risk.
Of course.
And it's easy for us to say that's a great idea because we're not putting our brand at risk to do that. It's little things like that. We go, that was a brilliant idea, but we just did not allow ourselves enough lead time to pull it off. The second campaign that we did, which is where we went from border walls to then we went to international border closures, and the campaign was all about the rest of the world has forgotten about Australia because we won't let anyone else come here anymore. That's probably been the weakest of the six that I've done. And I think what we didn't get right with that one, so it certainly wasn't a failure, it performed well. It also coincided with Omicron, and that meant that lots of truck drivers were getting sick. There was not much lamb in stores. People were distracted where I think we're on the third round of COVID lockdowns by then.
Okay.
So there was a lot of external environment stuff going on. I don't like to talk about stuff that I haven't participated in, but one of our core learnings, looking back at the history when we were analysing some of the lamb campaigns that hadn't gone well, was most people probably won't remember or realise there's one of the last 21 that didn't launch in January. So we've learned, do not move the launch date of the lamb ad, and it was done for very real reasons. So
which year was that?
So that would have been 2018 maybe. So
Okay.
so it was the year of floods and fires.
Okay.
Feels a little bit like this year as well. But
Yeah.
really bad floods, really bad fires.
So you thought it was bad timing?
So from a campaign to benefit Australian producers who
Yeah.
were doing it incredibly tough, it felt like it wasn't great timing to drop
Yeah.
that ad. Actually, it was 2019, sorry.
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
It was Lampolitica. It was also a very niche, dark subject matter.
Okay.
Because not all Australians were aware of the Cambridge Analytica scandal, and the tone was dark. And so they moved it to February to sort of move it away from all those natural disasters. And not only did it not resonate with the public because of the timing change, but actually Australia's lamb producers got up the marketing team for don't mess around with our campaign that we love. And the team was like, whoa, we were trying to do it because we thought it was the right thing to be
can't always get it
respectful
right,
to you guys. So definitely we learned that lesson loud and clear.
Yeah.
Do not mess with that January window.
A couple more quick things before we break. What's your favourite lamb ad?
For me, it's the first one, and I don't know if that's just because
The first one you did.
The first one that I did, which was the Border Walls one. But the reason why it's my favourite is, and I learnt a lot of lessons from that. The number one reason why it's my favourite is it felt like an incredibly risky choice to make at a time where, and it did a little bit, I was putting my reputation on the line because it was my first lamb ad, but everyone else was avoiding talking about COVID in negative terms.
Yes.
Everyone was talking about the good aspects, more time at home with family, or you can exercise more. And so brands were almost deliberately avoiding the lived reality of Australians' experience of going through border lockdowns and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah. And
we were like, well, it's not an authentic lamb ad unless we're talking about what's really going on. And the challenge there is then, well, how do you make that funny?
Yeah.
So for me, the biggest creative risk I've taken was the first ad that I made, because to do something that almost every other Australian marketer was deliberately avoiding, and I get why you would, for me just makes it my favourite. And I also just love the ad. You know, the idea of physical walls being built, and the story of that was so nice. And the line at the end of that ad is my favourite ever line of any lamb ad I've made, where the little girl looks up at the sort of hero older man and goes, "You did it, the United States of Australia." And he's just like, "Nah, it's just Australia." And it's such a heartfelt moment of unity that is what the campaign's meant to all be about. There's just so many aspects of that ad that I love.
Well, I did some very unscientific research on AI before we started the conversation, and according to this unscientific yet slightly scientific, Google search, "Make Lamb Not Walls" was the top three. Was in the top three, so that was like number one trending YouTube video with over 10 million views at the time. Number two was the Generation Gap from 2024.
Okay, great, yep.
That got 24.8 million views. It was boomers and Gen Xers and millennials and so on. I think you made reference to that. And then number one was Richie's Barbecue, 2015, the gold standard. Won a TV ad of the year at the time, and it had that nostalgic feel with Sam Kikovic as being the Lambassador.
Yeah, so look, Richie's Barbecue is a cracker. It's a great ad, and it wasn't meant to be Richie. For all of 2 days, that was Bob Hawke was going to play that role.
Oh, wow.
Mark had spoken to Bob, and Bob had agreed to do that. And then I think somewhere over the course of a weekend, his political staffers probably got on his ear and suggested might not be a great idea to be in a lamb ad. So this year was actually a bit of a full circle moment for us, because I don't know if you noticed, but in that download scene where all of the Australian things drop into the auditor's head after he's taken a bite of the lamb, one of those little snippets is actually Bob Hawke.
I didn't. Yeah.
And so we finally, 10, 11 years later, managed to get Bob Hawke into a lamb ad. But I think that one worked really well getting Richie. I mean, Richie sadly passed away.
Of course.
Not long after that. He was perfect for that role. And that was the first that sort of established the new strategy for the second decade of lamb ads.
Now, no interview is complete without an AI question.
Okay.
And I think the interesting thing here is how we're seeing just how quickly AI can produce creative content that looks, movie quality. How do you think it's going to impact the creative work next year?
look, for us, I'll come back to a word I've already used a couple of times, authenticity. So we're making a food ad, and actually, the agency hear me say this a lot. I'm always reminding them, guys, just don't forget, we're making a food ad. So the food has to look amazing and has to look appetizing. I'm sure AI can make food look good. I will probably resist using AI for anything that involves food for as long as I reasonably can. I also think, we've made AI jokes in lamb ads. We had an AI koshi in the comment section ad. So look, I don't think, because the nature of the lamb campaign and how we make it and things we kind of hold dear to what we think makes a great lamb campaign, that we're going to use a lot of AI in the creative process. I'm sure we will use it in post, but I'll resist using it on any of the food shots because I want the lamb to look real and authentic. People eat real lamb, so I want to show them real lamb.
My only critique would be like hamburger joints and all these food designers out there that, stuff this food to make with all sorts of weird creative things, glue and whatever, to make it look good for ads, right? So there is a precedent, even though it's food, right? Maybe not for lamb, but certainly in the industry.
Yeah, certainly there is. Yeah, probably more so for packaged foods.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you'll see it, the use of it continue to grow, because it just seems to be getting exponentially better and better. And bringing it back to the Super Bowl and how sometimes we benchmark the lamb ad. There was plenty of AI used in Super Bowl ads this year. So, I don't want to be too old school and a geriatric and say we're never going to use it. But philosophically, from my perspective, if you want your food to feel, look, and your communication to be authentic around it, then you probably should be using authentic, real food shots.
Nathan Lowe, thanks for joining us on the CMO Show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Hope you enjoyed the interview. I got to say, the thing that I'm taking away from this is a reflection on the importance of humour. If I think about my own reaction, is that it makes you laugh. And of course, the things that are true are always funny. And so their ability to really get to this heart of what it means to be Australian, but in the sense of finding that point of unity, just love that. And the way that they've been able to apply different marketing techniques year on year to push the boundaries, and then really, push into this idea that maybe we haven't done it before like this, we're not quite sure, but we'll give it a go anyway. Risk-taking is always hard, but in this case is paying off. So I hope you're taking a lot away from this episode. That's it for the CMO Show this week. We'll see you soon. The CMO Show is produced by Impact Institute in partnership with Adobe. Impact Institute is a professional services firm for purpose-led organisations. Our unique blend of impact consulting, brand storytelling and event services help our clients create meaningful change. This episode of the CMO Show was brought to you by your host, Mark Jones, that's me, and our producers, Niall Hughes and Kirsten Babels, and our amazing engineer, Ed Cheng. And a quick shout out to Adobe Experience Cloud, which gives digital businesses everything they need to design and deliver great customer experiences. Visit business.adobe.com to learn how Adobe can help transform your business.